Essentially, it's kind of the north-south divide writ large, isn't it, at the moment, that people in the north, I think possibly even more so than in previous decades, feel that they are being discriminated against, whether it's in the COVID crisis or wherever. But what can you do about that?
I think it's definitely about the fact there are huge disparities across the country. One of the things we'll be doing is relocating the Government Equalities Office to the north of England. So it's much more connected with the real issues on the ground. But it's also the focus there has been on which group somebody is in at the expense of their own individual ability to shape their own lives, their own agency. And I want an equality agenda that is much more focused on equality of opportunity, getting rid of the barriers to success, rather than the sort of quotas and targets advocated by the left that haven't actually worked to make society more equal.
But haven't you fallen into the trap of the very thing that you're criticising when you're saying you're moving the Equalities Office to the north? That's just a symbolic act, isn't it? A bit like you criticise Birmingham City Council for naming new streets Diversity Grove and Equality Road.
It's about making sure people who are making decisions about equality, about levelling up, are much closer to the people whose lives we want to who we want to help get on in life. The fact is, this debate has been dominated by lobby groups based in London, and the debate has become very, very insular. So I want civil servants, ministers, to be out across the country seeing the real issues people are actually facing, targeting discrimination in the workplace, looking at inequality in education, looking at areas like business opportunities. That's what the equality debate should be about. It's become very much about, as you just said, what's written on a street sign. That doesn't affect anybody's life at all.
But you're not going to be able to spend much time in an office in the north of England. You're all over the world doing trade deals. Quite right too. It's part of the equalities part is an important part of your job, but your primary job is to do trade deals. So you're not going to spend an awful lot of time there, are you?
Well, actually, I do spend a lot of time around the country talking to businesses about how they would benefit from trade deals, what they're looking at in what we're negotiating. Because the reason we're doing these trade deals is to create jobs and opportunities right across the UK. Obviously, it's been more difficult to travel during COVID, but next year I'm definitely planning to be out and about around the UK talking about the opportunities.
Now, given this year has been in some ways the year of Black Lives Matter, when you see the Daily Mail headline on your speech saying Equalities Minister Liz Truss slams focus on fashionable race and gender issues and dismisses quotas and unconscious bias training as tools of the left, this speech is not going to go down well with race equality campaigners, is it?
Well, I think racial equality is something we care deeply about as a government. We've set up the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities specifically to look at this. But what people in this country want is real action about their concerns about discrimination. They don't want the kind of symbolic gestures that have come to dominate this debate. So this is about taking action, whether it is on racism, sexism, geographical inequality, that genuinely benefits people's lives, whether it's facing high rates of crime, not being able to get a job because of your name or your accent. Those are the types of issues that are important. And I feel that a lot of the debate around racial equality has not been focused on those issues that really matter to people.
And you're abolishing all unconscious bias training within government, which you again regard as a tool of the left. Surely there is unconscious bias, though, particularly in job interviews. People do tend to appoint people like themselves. We know that to be a fact. Surely this is a retrograde step.
But we know that unconscious bias training doesn't actually work, that lots of government departments have undertaken this training. The studies have shown it doesn't have an impact. What actually has an impact are things like transparency over pay and promotions, making sure that you are making decisions on merit. There's a clear, structured process. Those are the things that work. Things like unconscious bias training and quotas have not been effective.
One of the things in your speech that I think that my takeaway from the speech is when you said if women open businesses at the same rate as men, we could add £250 billion to the economy. That is an astonishing figure. What can really be done about that to try and encourage more women to be entrepreneurs?
Well, one thing that is really positive is that there are more women businesses set up in technology because it's made it easier to set up a business. So one thing we can do is help women get the skills and training in areas like STEM and computing. One issue women face is not being able to get the finance to set up businesses. So having banks have more open and transparent processes to be able to get those finances helps women get on that entrepreneurial ladder. But this is a big campaign the government's running on women's economic empowerment to help women get those access to opportunities, which ultimately benefits us all. Because if we're wasting talent, we're not growing the economy, we're not benefiting families and businesses across the country.
I suppose you're going to come under a lot of scrutiny for the appointments that you make. Your opposite number, Emily Thornberry, says that since mid-July, you've appointed 253 people from outside government to advisory roles connected to trade, 25% women, that's 63, 240 people of them are white, 12 are Asian, and only one is black. Well, Simon Woolley from Operation Black Vote, he says there's a clear trajectory that seeks to downplay the reality of persistent race inequality. Well, when you look at those figures, you can only say he's got a point.
Well, on the advisors to the Board of Trade, we've appointed more women than men. But a lot of those roles you're talking about, Ian, are unpaid roles. And they're things like trade union representatives that trade unions have put forward. So when you're appointing representatives to a body like that, you really have to take the advice of the organisations and the people that they want to put forward. But when I have had a say over decision making in the department, we've got a woman permanent secretary at the Department of Trade, Antonia Romeo. We've just appointed a new women director general. We've just appointed a woman in charge of our US trade negotiating team. So where I have a direct role in the appointments, I'm very keen to make sure we're open to all the talents across Whitehall. And we have been promoting significant numbers of women to senior positions.
Just finally, a quick word on trade agreements. You've done a new one with Mexico this week, Singapore last week. Back in 2016, I remember being told by Remainers that it would be impossible to roll over EU trade agreements. How many have you done so far?
We've done 58. We've done agreements with 58 different countries, worth £198 billion worth of trade. And in the case of Japan, we've secured a deal that goes beyond and above what the EU are able to achieve in areas like digital and data, financial services, and also the recognition of over 70 British geographical indications for food and drink.
So is your ambition with these 58 agreements that you've done, once Brexit has been done, once we've hopefully got this free trade agreement with the EU at the end of the year, then you go back to all of these to try and make them even better than the ones that the EU were able to negotiate?
We're already in negotiations as well with Australia, New Zealand and the US, which are all countries that the EU don't have deals with. And we're also planning to do more ambitious agreements with Canada, South Korea, Mexico, and accede to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a really fast-growing group of 11 Pacific nations. So there's a lot of deals in the pipeline as well, Ian, to keep us busy next year.